Welcome to The Growth Project, a podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. Great to be back today. Dr. Drew Brannon, joined by, I know that prior to joining AMPLOS, a lot of people called you Dr. C.
Yes, they did.
Is that right?
Yes, my students would all call me Dr. C, and my athletes as well. So that's...
I can do Dr. Caviedes, but I think I'm going to do Dr. C sometimes. Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Dr. C.
Joined by Dr. C today. And we hope that you had an opportunity to get on to episode 1 of this podcast that we're doing, focused on the concept and the construct of mental rest. If you didn't, if you're hearing this for the first time, easy. All you got to do, go check us out last week where we had episode 1 and we really kind of got into overviewing exactly what this means and what some of the components are. Still can get, and we'll get plenty out of today if you did not catch episode 1. But Gabby, let's start there.
Yeah.
Can you offer just a little bit of a high level overview and recap of what we got into for episode 1?
Absolutely. So, we started off really recapping the types of demands that individuals experience, whether that be in sport or life in general, work, really touching on that there's, of course, your physical demands, the demands that you're putting on your body. And then you have your cognitive demands, those more thinking level demands, having to process and make decisions. And then, of course, your emotional demands, having to deal with, both positive and negative emotions that you experience in the day-to-day and how that affects performance. So really broke down the 3 different types of demands we experience, and then explored this idea of rest and further broke down rest into physical and mental rest.
Mm-hmm.
We've spent some time talking about how physical rest has really been a main topic of discussion for a lot of years. We highlighted some of the rest modalities that individuals go through for recovering their body. And
that's where cold plunging fits in.
Yes, that is where the cold plunges come in. But then we went into mental rest. And, again, that's the type of rest that I think is less talked about and less known widely. So
For sure.
Really went into discovering what mental rest is. And it's this idea of how do you let your brain and mind recover the same way you're letting your body recover. And introduce some of the experiences briefly that you can engage in to get mental rest. And then today we're really going to delve deeper into that.
Yeah, awesome. Great recap. Appreciate that very much. And yeah, I just go back in my mind to our discussion on episode 1. And one of the things that I felt like we were trying to establish fundamentally is how important it is to be resting.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, we're not that far away. I can't believe I'm saying this. We are not that far away from kind of the end of year rhythms that I know people typically get into. And in my experience, one of the more common things that people do is they get to the end of the year, and when they're doing their kind of like look back, assess, reflect, we hope we're doing those things. It's very, very normal to do that and then develop kind of this insight of like, I've got to do some things differently with my time, with my schedule. I've got to create more margin. They might not be using the word rest,
right,
but it's part of what they're realizing they need to do.
Absolutely.
So I think our timing in this conversation is fantastic because we aren't that far away from people going through the process of doing that type of stuff.
I couldn't agree more. And this idea of scheduling in your me time is going to be something that I think we'll touch on today. But yeah, I think at the end of the year, you reflect and you say, wow, I've done a lot this year, but I'm exhausted, I'm drained, and what have I done for me?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And the one other comment I want to make here is when you go through that process of assessing, thinking about where you won over the course of the year, how you hope to maybe win to a larger degree or maybe a larger extent in the coming year, I find that the tendency is that people are looking to like dial up in different areas.
Yeah.
More, right? Do more. And this isn't necessarily a discussion about doing more versus doing less. It's about finding the right opportunities to rest, to let your body rest, to let your mind rest. It's interesting because what we really see here is that if you'll just do that, it really can become a competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
And that's what so much of today is about, that we're going to get into, is helping you better understand in very practical, concrete ways. If you want to put this into practice, we're going to offer you ideas for how you do that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to something both you and Mill always say, which is finding the harmony in your work-life balance.
Harmony. There's that word.
I think that this is going to give you those practical strategies to help you obtain that harmony.
We're headed on a harmony mission.
Yes,
how's
a
that
harmony
sound? Okay,
mission.
so Gabby, before we get into these specific examples, I do want to spend a few more moments at least talking about like why this is so vital. And specifically, I know you're going to touch on some of your data you collected in your dissertation research. So let's start there. We know that mental rest affects both well-being and performance. Yes. Share some of the data with us, please.
My data really was focused on NCAA athletes and looking at mental rest and linking it to depressive symptoms and overall athlete well-being. And what we found was that over 50% of our large population that we sampled had clinically relevant depressive symptoms. So that's quite a large percentage.
Yeah, so just pause there for 1 second. And, I was an NCAA athlete. Plenty of people who are listening to this were, maybe some are. I think probably some are. We certainly have people that are currently in college listening. That's a tough stat to hear.
Isn't it?
In part because for so many athletes, myself included, that was the dream.
Right.
Like the dream, the goal, the vision was to earn an opportunity to play your sport at the collegiate level. And yet half of your sample was endorsing symptoms consistent with depressive symptoms.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So
it was a shocking statistic for us to find because, we genuinely didn't think it would be that high.
Yeah.
And it's grown massively over the years, especially post-COVID, it skyrocketed if you look back at the data. So it's continuing to rise, which is really why this idea of mental rest became such a focus for me and why it matters so much because it has a large impact.
Right. So I know that's not the primary focus of our conversation today, but let's at least offer our listeners a little bit of insight in, how is that? Why is that? Like, what are some of the key drivers of why those numbers are that high?
Yeah. So really what we found was that it was the cognitive and emotional demands that athletes were experiencing, that they felt that they weren't able to cope with those effectively or manage them effectively. And so it just wore them down over time. They in some literature that we looked at really highlighted that they were doing all the things for their physical recovery protocol. They were, making sure that they were healthy, eating the right foods, their nutrition was on point. So we were thinking, what else is it here?
Yeah.
Started asking some questions around, what are you doing in your free time? 9 times out of 10, they said, what free time?
Yeah.
I eat, breathe, sleep my sport and school. And that led us down this path of, okay, well, how do we help you manage that? How do we help you recover from that side of it?
Yeah. So I'm going to make a leap here, and it's not too far-fetched, but if we go back to episode 1, we were talking a lot about just people in a professional sense who are in a highly pressured, highly structured type of industry. There's plenty of them out there. And I think the commonality here is those folks are also feeling under the gun, feeling pressure to deliver, right? To yield outcomes, to light up the scoreboard, whatever it might be. Now, here's a big difference. Guess what they're not doing? They're not getting nearly as much physical activity as the athletes are,
right,
which is intended to be kind of a stress or coping mechanism, nor are they eating as well as these kids are.
Right.
I wouldn't think. I mean, now, if the kids aren't eating well, that's on them, but they're being provided with more than enough nutritious food.
Right.
So the nutrition and the physical activity is more than likely much better than the busy working professional. And so that gets me even more worried about, like, what do their numbers look like? And we don't know, but it's hard to think they look better than that.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if they were, much higher than that.
So approximately 50% of those in your sample had clinically relevant symptoms of depression. And then also talk, please, about what about flourishing? And
Yes.
maybe explain what that means as well.
Yeah. So this idea of well-being, right? It's we characterize it as either you have a flourishing well-being or a languishing well-being. And flourishing is where you experience a lot of positive emotions on a daily basis. You're happy, you're expressing gratitude for the life you have, and just overall satisfaction. Languishing is kind of the opposite of that, where you dread the days, you think negatively about all of the things you have to do in a given day, the demands you have, and it's just kind of like this gray cloud is how I describe it. This, you wake up and you're just like not excited to live the life that you have in front of you. And what we found was that only 45% of our athletes were in that flourishing category. So going back to, like you said, this is something that they've dreamed of, competing at the Division I level, being a D1 athlete. I mean, that's a dream for all of these kids. And they get there and all of a sudden that's not the case anymore. They dread it now. And that's very concerning.
Yes, it's extremely concerning. And I want to, as we're going through this, I do think it's important to interject this. We aren't trying to paint college athletics in just like a negative light. That is not the intention of what we're saying, obviously. I mean, we both love college sports, but what we are trying to bring to light here is just some, I think, compelling data that forces us, I hope, to really think critically about like, how did we get here and what can be done? And then I think it's an important connection to make to the working world, right?
Absolutely.
So for working professionals, however you define that, really in any industry. So I think it's important that we're able to do that. All right. So I think it's pretty clear to me why this is so important.
Yeah.
Any additional comments or thoughts from you on why it matters before we really get into kind of these resting examples?
No, I think the only other thing I'd add is that it's really, this goes for the professional world as well, is breaking the stigma around what I call the productivity monster, where we feel like if we take 5 minutes of just sitting on the couch, we don't even fully relax, and we're hard on ourselves. We're saying, "Oh, I'm not doing enough," and that is going to be a big factor into this idea of applying these principles. Is don't let that productivity monster constantly be that chip on your shoulder. Allow yourself to engage in these practices.
Yeah. I've not heard that term before.
Really?
The monster. Yeah. Look out for the monster.
Look out for the monster. Yep.
Okay, well then let's jump into it, Gabby, and we're going to do it this way. We're going to kind of drill down and get into much more detail on kind of the 4 resting examples or categories that we talked about last time, beginning with detachment. And so as we get into these, probably a little bit, we'll do a little review, but then I know we're particularly focused on unpacking these in the sense of like, here's how you put this to work.
Yeah.
So we'll start with detachment, which we're really defining as this is a person's ability to switch off.
Yeah.
So elaborate on that a little bit, please.
Yes. So switch off is really this principle of how do you separate yourself from your sport or work fully? Let your mind not worry about what you have going on at work when you leave the office or when you close that laptop for the day. And it's a complex principle because, nowadays, we've talked about this previously, is everything's on your phone. Right. And those notifications, they ping. And, if you have a smartwatch, you're not only getting it on your phone, you're getting buzzed on your wrist, even if your phone's not in your hand.
Yep. Although I've turned all those off.
Yeah. Smart.
So I
highly encouraged.
My kids give me a hard time. They're like, why do you even have an Apple Watch?
Yeah.
Because I don't utilize really like any of the things that it's supposed to offer you, but no notifications, no texts, no calls, no nothing.
Yeah.
But I still like it.
Yeah.
It still serves me well, but I just turn all those things off.
Yeah. Well, that's detaching right there.
Yeah.
That's
trying
what
to
you're
anyways.
actively trying to do is, but you say trying, and what makes it trying and not doing?
Well, with the watch, I would say I'm doing it. I guess I'm talking about other domains. Yeah. Other domains, maybe not quite as successful. And I think, but even the, the example of trying to kind of wind down your day. And what I hear a bunch is that wow, I can never completely get away from it. My brain never shuts off.
Yeah.
And okay, maybe there's some truth to that. But what I do know is that there are decisions you can make. You don't have to get back on that computer.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to reply to that work email that now I'm waiting, kind of wondering if they're going to reply back to me. And
Right.
so there are some things you can do that people aren't necessarily doing.
Yeah. And I mean, you're not even hitting on all of the increase in work from home individuals, which makes it even
Right.
harder to detach, because now your personal space, your home space, has become your workspace. So another key principle here is, how do you separate yourself from your office space in your home,
Yep.
from your bedroom, and keeping that a place of a work-free zone, if you will.
Yep. Yep. And I think about the funny example. Milt has talked about this on the podcast a couple of times, that there was a client of his that during COVID started this routine, because he's working from home, like a lot, like you're talking about. A lot of people were doing that. He started this routine where he would, when he was ready to shut down for the day, he would close his computer. He would walk out of his office. He would go out the side door of his house and walk around to the front and come in the front door.
Wow.
Kind of like, I'm home.
Yeah, I'm home for the day.
I'm back.
Yeah.
And although it sounds kind of maybe funny as we're sitting here talking about it while on the podcast, it's interesting to me. Yeah. Like, I think he wouldn't be doing it if he didn't find value in it. Mm-hmm. But even just that real kind of like thoughtful example of, I'm going to detach from my day by like going out the side door and coming through the front door, I think it's pretty clever.
Very clever. I mean,
I like it.
That's detachment in a active setting right there. I love it.
But it's that idea of like, how do you really separate from, in this case, we're talking about work. Mm-hmm. If we're talking for athletes, that's especially hard, because you think, here's one of the differences is like, where in the sports world, we know it's normal in the evenings, for example, maybe near the end of the day, people are on social media because of what they're interested in. The odds are what's on their social media is sports.
Absolutely.
All those things. Yeah. Whereas, if I'm in an industry, make up the industry, I'm in the healthcare industry, maybe some of that is coming in on my social media feed, but it's not the same. It's different. So it's particularly hard for athletes.
Yeah, it is. And it reminds me of a client I worked with somewhat recently. It's affecting young kids these days too. It's just, just eye-opening. As I had this athlete who after school, she had about an hour, maybe 2 hours before practice, and she'd go home, scroll on her phone, and all she'd see is soccer videos.
Yeah,
and
that sounds right.
She would express to me, I'm dreading going to practice. Like, I don't know why. I just don't want to go. And I said, well, what are you doing in those 2 hours? And she said, scrolling. I said, watch your favorite TV show instead.
Yeah.
Got home from school the next week, watched your favorite TV show for an hour before going to practice, and came back, and she said, that helped me so much.
Yeah.
Just not thinking about my sport before showing up. So it can be done not only after, at the end of the day, but prior as well.
Well, and that's a good example too about active versus passive digital consumption. Yep. And I know we've touched on that in some prior episodes, but if you're not familiar with it, you'll hear and you'll read people talking about how digital consumption before bed is bad. Mm-hmm. And there is truth to that, but there's varying types here. Whereas if I'm on my phone scrolling, that's active digital consumption, where my mind is very much engaged. Like the example would be if someone's scrolling through TikTok or Instagram and you're going from like one video to the next, you're kind of like checking in to each one with each passing video. It's very active. Yep. Passive digital consumption is what you just said. I'm watching a TV show,
right?
Or I'm watching a movie, or I'm watching a show, whatever it is, and that's so much better for your brain.
So much better. Yeah.
So much better. So if you've got to be doing something digital before you go to bed, try to select a passive example and not be just scrolling.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
All right. Any other thoughts on detachment?
I think that we've covered it pretty extensively here. Anything from you?
The only other one I would say that I have found super helpful in my personal life would be trying to draw a hard line on the time at which you're not going to do any work after.
Yeah.
Because like I know for me, if I whatever given bedtime, whatever the target is for me personally, if I can go rewind 90 minutes
Mm-hmm.
and draw a hard line there, if I'm not doing any work after 90 minutes before I'm going to go to bed, I fall asleep great.
Yep.
If I violate that and I'm working within that 90-minute window, I don't sleep very well.
Right.
And so you just have to know yourself.
Yes.
But for me, that's a really, really important detachment mechanism.
Yeah. I love what you said there. You've got to know yourself and what you need to detach, because everybody's going to be a little bit different in that way. Some people need 30 minutes. Some people need 90 minutes. Some people just need 5. And it's figuring out what you need and being aware of that.
I don't know how those 5-minute people do it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we're talking about relaxation. So first was detachment. Now on to number 2. Let's unpack kind of the relaxation component, which a lot of that is about lowering, the terminology you'll see in the literature here is everything from arousal to stress, maybe anxiety.
Yep.
There's a lot of kind of synonymous use of those terms.
Yes. Yeah. So lowering that activation, if you will, the arousal level is just getting yourself to a calm state.
Yep.
Keeping your heart rate low, your blood pressure low, and your breathing very regulated and calm. A lot of different things can be used for relaxation. All of the things we typically think about when we think about, I'm going to go relax. I'm going to meditate, do some deep breathing. I'm going to listen to my favorite music and just kind of really lock in and just listen, not think about anything else. Art is a form of relaxation where some people, I know something that's become more prominent is the paint by numbers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of adults are doing this now, where it's this idea of just getting a coloring book or a painting book, and all you do is like what a little kid does. You just color in based off of the number associated with the color. And so many people find this to just be so relaxing.
That is a big deal now.
Yeah, it is.
I've never done that, but I've heard about this.
Yeah.
That it's a lot of people find it to be super relaxing.
Yeah. So anything like that, going for a little walk outside, preferably without your phone, right?
Yeah, preferably without your phone for sure.
But anything that's really going to help you get into that calm, relaxed state.
So let's do a practical example here,
Yeah.
and because it could look something just like this. Imagine you have a big meeting coming up later that day, and you know it, and it's been on your calendar for quite some time. Key client, key potential client, whatever it is. And let's create a very simple 1 to 10 system here, whether we're using arousal, anxiety, stress, whatever it is. 1, 2, 3, very low. 8, 9, 10, very high. We don't want to be 1, 2, 3, nor do we want to be 8, 9, 10.
Right.
8, 9, 10 is usually the more common problem. If it's a big meeting, you're probably not 1, 2, or 3. But when we talk about relaxation, what we're saying is it's not good for you to go into that meeting at an 8, 9, or a 10.
Right.
And so, Gabby, if I'm a 9 at any given moment, what's the best thing I can do to dial back and figure out how to become a 6?
The most effective thing in the literature is breathing techniques.
Yep.
Deep inhales, long exhales, and just doing 2 minutes worth of deep breathing will have massive effects on your activation or arousal levels. The science behind it is there. It just forces your body to enter that calmer state by slowing the heart rate and getting that oxygen into the bloodstream.
Yeah. It's just such a massively helpful tool and such a great tool. It's super efficient. It doesn't take long.
Yep.
There's no cost involved.
Yep.
There's no advanced training needed to be able to do it. It's great.
It is.
It's such a great tool. Okay. So we've got relaxation. Now let's get into talking about the third of 4 that we're going to review, control, which is really capturing this idea of reclaiming autonomy. So talk us through that, kind of what that really means, Gabby.
Yeah. So I know in the last episode, we touched on how, not only athletes, but individuals, working as well, feel like they have very little control over their day-to-day.
Yeah. Normal.
Yeah. Normal. You've got all these other commitments and obligations that interfere with you feeling like you have a say. So this idea of control is helping you regain that sense of, I have some decision over what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. And the key here too is that includes doing nothing at all. If you know that you want to be able to do nothing at all, allowing yourself that. And it's a very powerful tool because we talk about autonomy all the time, and it's one of those core basic needs for motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And if we aren't prioritizing that, it has huge detriments on our productivity and overall well-being.
And that's just even one of the biggest ways, more common ways you increase stress is you take away the autonomy.
Absolutely.
So when you remove that from someone's capability, it typically drives up stress, drives up cortisol. So the inverse there is true as well. How do we help people feel more at ease?
Right.
We'll give some of that back. So if you feel like you have a greater degree of autonomy as an individual, and regardless of where you are in life, what you're doing, what you're focused on, you're more likely to be able to check out and feel at ease. And then even the example here of control and how it relates to mental rest, when I can choose, you know what, like, hey, this, next Saturday afternoon, I'm going to take a couple hours and I'm going to go out to, the park and enjoy a nice walk. Well, okay, I'm choosing it. I'm getting away. And there's a million other examples. But when you feel like you have a greater degree of control over making a decision like that, you get more out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love your example because it, like you said, you feel like you have a degree of control over it. But let's say you wake up that Saturday morning and now it's raining and storming. So what you felt you had control over and what you were maybe looking forward to, now that's gone.
Your plans
you don't
are
have control.
getting washed out.
Yeah. So then how do you navigate still obtaining this in a moment like that?
I guess you head to the fitness center and jump on the treadmill, maybe if that was part of what you were trying to do exercise wise. You've got options. You could maybe your Saturday afternoon plan becomes your Sunday afternoon plan, things like that.
Absolutely. Being flexible. That's why this idea of control is so important, but you have to always be flexible with it. You can't be rigid in the control piece because you're never going to have.
It's not going to be
control.
perfect.
Right.
It is not going to be perfect.
Going back to your example that you were saying about your bedtime process, being able to, control that you have 90 minutes before bed where you're not thinking about work, not looking at work. That's detachment, but also control because you have that control. It's just a matter of, holding yourself accountable to it.
Yeah.
It's easy to say, okay, well, just one more email.
Or algebra homework. That has to, which I call that work too, because it's pushing. I did algebra a long time ago. It's not easy to go dial those things back up to try to help.
Yep.
Okay. So let's get into the last one here. Variety, meaning breaking routine. How does breaking routine and having more variety help us rest mentally?
Well, it helps with the monotony of it, right? We get into the same routines day in, day out. And let's be honest, it gets boring.
Yeah. There's a lot of average Tuesdays in life. The older you get, the more you realize that.
Absolutely. So it's how do you basically spice life up? How do you still have something to look forward to and get excited about? Even if it's something very small, like, trying a new hobby or, say your favorite artist puts out a new album, listening to that on the way to work, and that switches things up for you. It's really these small things that can add variety into your day-to-day.
Yeah. It's changing how you do meetings, changing the order in which you tackle things in meetings. Removing meetings and adding different types. There's lots of things you can do.
Well, something we've been doing in the new office even is, getting out of our offices and going to one of the other spaces in here and working in there for a little bit. So especially for those of you who maybe work from home, it's, switch up getting out of your office, go respond to an email while you walk around the neighborhood or, go sit at the dining room table and look out the window if you have that kind of view. anything that just changes up the
Simple
routine.
stuff.
Yep.
And we all know what that feels like, right? Like you get that feeling where it's like, man, I got to get out of here. I need a
Absolutely.
break. That's what mental rest is. But ideally, you'd want to be doing that before you get to the point where it's like, I got to get out of here. Let's do this sooner.
Micro breaks.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, so let me just recap those, Gabby, one last time for the listeners so everybody has them. So our 4 categories of how do you go grab a hold of and achieve mental rest. It's a function of detachment, relaxation, control, and variety. Yep. Those are the categories we want to be challenging our listeners to think in and try to get creative with.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I know we need to kind of move toward wrapping up here in a few minutes, but what are some final thoughts we can offer on this idea of, this is for leaders especially, and so when we say leaders, this could be coaches in an athletic environment, it could be business leaders in an organizational sense, but how do you establish a culture of, hey, we value and we care about mental rest?
Well, I think the leaders, you have to model it, be that lead by
you do.
example. And this is where you have to kind of check in with yourself and say, what am I doing? What are my practices when it comes to mental rest? Because if you're not setting those boundaries, if you're not, shutting down at 8:30 to give yourself an hour or 90 minutes before bed, then, you're not really setting the tone for your employees or your athletes. If you're constantly on your lunch break talking about projects that you have coming up or things that need to get done throughout the day, that's being communicated. That lunch break is not really a break. It's a time where we still talk about what we have to do and what we need to get done. And it goes back to this idea of the productivity monster. If you're not creating a culture where it's okay to not talk about work, where it's okay to not be 100% go, go, go all the time, and allow yourself and your employees to have these micro breaks, then it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, if you're talking about, hey, this thing is important, but not doing that, then you're sending a message that it's not that important. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about mental rest or whatever the example is. Got to live with alignment, right? Got to be consistent. But the great irony of that as well is if you go back to kind of a business leader, typically everybody wants the same things. And what I mean by that is like, hey, the business leader wants the team to perform at the highest level it possibly can. The people on the team want to perform at the highest level they possibly can. And yet sometimes what happens is the business leader or the leader in the company is just like pushing, driving, and not valuing things like this enough. And then no one's getting what they really want anyways.
Right.
Because you're going to get a lesser capability level and kind of a compromised human because he or she doesn't have the energy, the focus, the passion, whatever it is needed to perform at an optimal level.
Absolutely.
So there's massive ROI associated with valuing both physical and mental rest.
Absolutely. I think it goes outside of the office too. It goes into your personal life. When you get home from work, what are you talking to your spouse about? Of course you want to ask how their day was and you want to know how work was. But setting boundaries in that domain too of, okay, well, let's talk about work for 10, 15 minutes. Let's do the updates. But now let's talk about things outside of work.
Let me tell you the fix for that. Teenagers. If you just have some teenagers that live with you, they don't want to hear about it one bit, and they're not afraid to tell you that.
Yep.
Whereas, when the kids were younger, they didn't want to hear about it then either, I don't think, but they were a little more maybe subdued about letting me know. So they don't want to hear about it. Makes it easier. All right. Well, as we kind of wrap up, just want to thank our listeners for tuning in and really want to challenge you to reflect on where you are with respect to a lot of the stuff we've talked about. Yeah. We've given you, particularly today, I think some very practical, put these to work immediately type ideas. Maybe start with one category, whether it be detachment, whether it be control, whatever it is, but choose one area and choose one action you're going to get started with and then get moving.
Absolutely. Start small and build from there.
Yeah, get moving, and maybe this becomes part of your end of year review, although you don't need to wait that long. You could do this right now.
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning in. Gabby, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing particularly a lot of your research from Florida State.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that very much, and the way it really informed what we were talking about here. All right, well, thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to our next conversation coming up here real soon. Take care.